The Buddha tells us in this first category of neurotic states of mind that effectively the one that's day to day the cause of all our pain and suffering is called attachment. This is hilarious. I mean, on the face of it, it just doesn't make sense because we have such a different, this is the point, we have such a different definition of attachment. Mostly for us, we conflate it with love. I'm so attached to my family. So then we hear the Buddha says I've got to give it up. We get very depressed. And as Lama Zopa says, you mean I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness? Because we don't have Buddha's definition. This is one of our major problems. We don't even know what he means by it. So when we hear what he means by it, we'll go, oh, I recognize that. And this is the crucial point, which is not in modern psychology. The unhappy ones, which cause our pain and therefore cause us to harm others, have, like I said, have this particular characteristic of being very disturbing, very rigid, and it's an exaggerating conceptual story. So attachment, as I said, Buddha talks about 84,000 distinct neurotic states of mind, which sounds ridiculous. It's a map of the mind, I promise. And he narrows them down, luckily, to 3. And we're so used to thinking, oh, so 3 poisons, sounds so cute, But this is serious. These are 3 toxic emotions, and they have this intimate relationship. When we understand these 3, we have a profound understanding of our own mind and of everybody else, because all the others are branches from these, So the root one, and we're not going to go into this one much, but that's the root of the root problems that we all know about when we hear about realizing emptiness. That's the one we're trying to get rid of when we talk about that. That's the most subtle, most primordial. And its energy is this separate, lonely, bereft, concrete, set in stone me. It's so primordial. Its nature is fear, but it's like a sleeping lion. It only arises when someone attacks you or offends you. Then your heart is beating and you're having a panic attack. That's this primordial one. And its nature is fear. Its nature is fear. It gives rise, because we've got this sense of a separate, lonely, bereft, nothing me, then it gives rise to this emotional hunger, which is attachment. But attachment is multifaceted. The most primordial level is dissatisfaction. I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I've got nothing, haven't got enough, no matter what I get, not enough, blah, 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 blah. Then naturally it gives rise to this hankering. Well, there must be something out there that when I get it, it'll fill me up. This is the main job in every day, trying to get some nice sense object such that when you get contact with it, a bit of happiness is triggered. And it is happiness. There's no argument there. So this is how we spend our lives. To get, what's missing? Oh, chocolate cake. Have the cake, wait for happiness to come. We won't even go to deeper details here. And then all the time changing, all the time wanting more. This one's never enough, never enough, never enough. So that's dissatisfaction. Attachment is dissatisfaction, which is the instinct from past lives practice. Then it's this emotional hunger for something out there such that when I get it, I'll feel satisfied. And then we dump, and that's mainly the first level is objects of the senses. Boys, handbags, cake, you name it. We're kind of limitless in our capacity to make up things such that when we get them, they'll make us happy. We're all different in that way, We can see it. And we spend our lives trying to get those objects, convinced that when we get them, the happiness will come. And we don't analyze it because it's also instinctive, right? So then the next level of attachment, and this is this key job, is the more hungry you are, the more the emotional hunger of missing, the more the boy will be a divine. The more your emotional hunger, the more divine the boy will look. So attachment does its job of grossly exaggerating Fred's divineness. That's it. And then you believe that Fred is the most divine person since sliced bread. You can't believe this angel, this person, this perfect person. Finally, I have found happiness. We will be together until we're 80, etc., etc., etc. And so this next function of attachment, the exaggeration, and then the intense anticipation, expectation, and he had better behave like that. And then you're going to be forever for eternity. You're going to be together for eternity. And that's an exaggerated example. All our attachment objects are variations of that story, So all Buddha's telling us is that, that's not love. That's an exaggerated, distorted, emotional hunger that dumps and projects onto other people and things characteristics they haven't got. They exaggerate. And so we set ourselves up for disappointment. Because Fred is not that gorgeous. He can't be. You ask his ex-wife. But the disappointment kicks in. And then you get angry, and then before you know it, you've chucked him out and you want a younger version. And he's gone from the friend category to the enemy category. And we never question our projections. We never question, So the thing is, though, the deeper level of attachment is this one. And this is hard to hear. We only really hear about this when we go to the Bodhisattva path. We hear this weird concept called the 8 worldly Dharmas. All this is attachment at a more subtle, more primordial level. The first level is Buddhist kimi is to calm our senses down and so not jumping on too many boys and too many bits of cake. This level is more primordial, more subtle, more nuanced. So then there's this different eight pairs of how attachment functions that run our lives. But the ones I want to talk about, the deepest, they say this is the subtlest one, the most pervasive, and it's the one that finally goes. It's the last one to go. In other words, it's the closest to this ego grasping, this root delusion, this wrong sense of self. And they call it attachment to reputation, which sounds rather silly, but what do you think it is? This hunger every second since we are born, this hunger to get other people to like me, to approve of me. This drives the universe. This sounds so absurd almost, and it's really hard to see because it's so automatic. It's there all the time. So since we're tiny little girls, let's say we're the good girl, or whatever we are, that's a nice girl, you're a nice girl, you've got good qualities, you're kind, you're mummy's little helper, you're patient, you're loving, you're compassionate, but you've also got bucket loads of attachment, because we all have got it, join the universe, and so it manifests since you're even a tiny baby. These delusions are there already. Mummy doesn't teach you. These come from the past. This is driving your little baby, and then mummy looks at you and she smiles, she goos at you and she touches you, and then already this instinct to be liked is going, wow, that must have worked, I'll do it again. And the next day mummy's angry and she punches you in the nose. No wonder we get confused. So this attachment to being seen is, in other words, attachment is the symptom of a really suffering, low self-esteem person who thinks they're nothing. This is the irony of ego in Buddhism, that we think we're nothing. So what are we going to do to become something? Get someone else out there. So you're watching them like a hawk, you behave a certain way, and then they smile at you, and then we go, oh, that worked, I must be okay. And in other words, we have no confidence in who we are. We have no sense of steadiness. We're these completely demented people who are adjusting our behavior every second, adjusting our words to try and make sure the person there, the stranger in the street, in the car, in the shop, our mummy, our boyfriend, checking up to make sure they respond nicely. And then I go, oh, that must have been okay. They approved of it. We are insane. Mummy, yes, you would often say we're schizophrenic. Don't think I'm being insulting. This is how deep this one is, So in other words, we have these lovely sayings in the West. You've got to become your own person. So, the good girl one is you're such a nice person. Most of you people are nice people. You don't go out there raping and stealing and lying, and you're not pedophiles. Forget those extreme delusions, but these are the ones we've got, this constant sense I'm not enough. Constant sense, so therefore where do you look to become enough? Other people. But the irony is he's just as pathetic as you. And you're each propping each other up. He's looking at you to make you approve of him, and you're wanting him to approve of you, and you're both low self-esteem. It's kind of demented. Excuse me, are we communicating here? This is for everybody. We are driven by this sense that I am not enough, so I have to be approved of by others, which means you need to be liked. Look at the pain when even a stranger doesn't look at you nice. This is how deep this painful state of mind is. They say the yogis in the mountains who've given up everything are still thinking of what the villagers downtown are thinking about them. That's how deep this one is. And it's in our head all the time. We're having these endless conversations, aren't we? And we're telling people what we think. We're letting a person know. As soon as we leave work and something funny happened, we're already telling Fred when we get home, because we can't hold any of our own thoughts. We have to have other people approve of our thoughts. We have to have people to know what we're thinking, because we don't approve of them ourselves. I remember this one example I used, just different variations of this on the planet. One Australian nurse was working in London with dying people, and she wrote a book called The 5 Greatest Regrets of the Dying. And the greatest regret was that I didn't follow my heart, instead I did what I thought other people expected of me. That's a symptom of this one. So there's a goodness there. If you're a kind person, then do not criticize the kindness. The kindness you see is the virtues, and that's separate from the non-virtues, but we think they're the same. So, but this attachment, this hunger, this neediness, this fearful neediness to be seen to be doing the right thing, to be approved of, we find it unbearable if we get criticized or disliked. This is why we go mad. This is why we kill ourselves when the boyfriend leaves us. And this is, to analyze it to this level is really quite shocking, because we take it as a given in our culture that we're social beings and we become socialized by other people letting us know that we're nice people. We depend upon this in our view of what a person is in the West. Buddhism is way more subtle, way more profound, way more amazing. In fact, if you don't have too much worry about what people think of you, we think you're mentally ill in our culture. We think you're mentally ill. This is how bizarre we are in our culture, may I say, This is a huge one. But to unpack this one, to get all past the other ones, this takes time, people. It just takes time,
So, Venerable Robina, there's a couple of questions
about
this one. Then is it too simplistic to go with the saying, if you don't love yourself, then no one else can?
No, these are wonderful, they're utter truths. Of course, but of course you need methods of how to do it. It's easy to say it. So we do get all this in the West. You see, Buddha didn't invent this. Listen to this, people. Buddha did not invent this stuff. Anybody can get all this. It's just that I think Buddha's really good at it. And I'm talking things that we all know, but I'm talking straight from the Buddha. This is Buddhism, but I'm putting it in my words. So we get it. Lots of people with intelligence can see these things, but Buddha's just an expert at it, I would suggest. Yeah, go on.
So that was from Louise, and then Janine Little has asked, the primordial instinctive response to danger or perceived danger is really difficult to catch.
That's right.
And also the primordial response of like this need to be seen, it's difficult to catch. So how can we improve our response?
That's like asking me, when you don't know how to play the piano, that it's really difficult to know how to play the piano. Well, guess what, honey? You practice. I'm not being mystical. You've got to start somewhere. This is Buddha's expertise. He's got these methods to learn to develop your mind into the most insanely brilliant, confident, clear, vast, astonishing, wise, happy mind that you can't even believe. This is the map. So it's all there. The map is there, babe. So you start at the beginning.
That's the really difficult thing, though, Venerable, to actually even be able to sort out what's a virtuous mind and what's
not. Yeah, because you haven't got the methods yet. It's difficult to know the difference between salt and sugar until you learn it. So you have to learn it, don't you?
And also because a lot of those negative minds, like the need to be seen, it kind of appears like a legitimate good thing.
That's because we don't know. Another analogy, I have to keep saying it, we don't know the difference between a weed and a herb. It's a really good analogy. And that is our problem. And in our culture, we think the weeds, we give equal status to the weeds and the herbs. We think they're both natural part of a good garden. So the weeds and the herbs analogy is a great one. The Buddha's telling us that the weeds are there. They are natural. We've all got them, but we can learn to change them and get rid of them eventually. That you've got to start with that assumption. Then you have to learn to know how to distinguish, which is why you have to study the Buddhist model of the mind. You first learn theoretically the delusions are emotional, they're neurotic, and they're exaggerating. They're the characteristics. Initially hearing it, but not knowing it. You don't know yet. I wouldn't know yet how to look at a herb and a flower, a herb and a weed. But when you learn it, you keep learning, and you go one day, oh, I see the difference. It takes time. What I'm saying is the methods are there. The system is there. The map is there. The methods are there. All I'm doing is sort of wrapping on the practice, So the thing is to have the confidence. I can learn to be a botanist. I can learn to know the difference. Of course it's difficult. That's the point, because we haven't learned the botany. You're not just by looking at this is a very interesting point. In our world, we talk about mindfulness. We've made up our own versions of mindfulness, and that's perfectly fine. Buddha does not own copyright. But we tend to think that mindfulness is just observing the mind. That's a crucial part of it. But listen to this. That's like thinking, I'm going to learn about gardens. So I'm going to look at the garden. I'm going to be mindful of what's in that garden. And that's a good thing. You're going to concentrate and you're going to look at the garden. And you can even have such good mindfulness that you could replicate that garden in a drawing. But listen to this, people. What is the point of looking at the things in a garden? It's so you can learn to distinguish between herbs and weeds. The only reason to do that is that. But if you don't learn botany, you can look at the garden till the cows come home. But if you can't identify what you're seeing, you just become a moron. You just become stupid. That's not enough. You have to learn botany. Here we're learning Buddhist botany, what is attachment and what is love. So let's listen. Let's just discuss then the difference between just simply old attachment and love, just towards a person. Let's just discuss the difference. This is the weeds and the flowers, because we conflate them. And this is all the problem. And we, even in our culture, in our views about the mind, we give equal status to all this stuff, meaning you'd be weird if you got rid of anger. We actually think we need anger. So this is such a radically different view, which is why you've got to be careful in identifying what he means by these, because it's not the way we think. So, attachment is the driving force. It's the hunger in us. So then, we meet people, and we say you're looking for the boyfriend. I say that's what you want, It could be the handbag, but just say talk about the boyfriend, because that brings love in. So naturally, we don't notice it. We just think, I'm looking for a boyfriend. That's perfectly normal. The world does it. You want a house and you want 2.5 babies and whatever it is you want. I'm not being sarcastic, please. It's a powerful way to live your life. So then you start to plan it and think about it. But all the time, when it's really serious, and let's say you get the boyfriend and then he gives you up, that's when the devastation is, I must be nobody, I must be nothing, he gave me up, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, I'm on my own. And then the whole world looks like it's full of happy couples, isn't it? Because in your mind all the time you're thinking, I need a boyfriend, I must have a boyfriend, I'm not real until I get a boyfriend, I'm not a proper person, I haven't got a partner. I mean, when I knew Miffy first when she was young, when I was young too, but she was younger. And I remember I was like 30 or 29, 30 I think at that point when I met Miffy, I think. Anyway, I remember my family by that point all had their husbands, just about all. They were sort of fairly unconventional, but really worried about Robina because she didn't have a partner. This is just normal life. These days it's a little bit different, but this is such a severe view, isn't it? That you're only a half a person. So when you have that view naturally and you feel it sincerely, I'm not being critical. Some people have this, some people even say, I'm not being sarcastic at all. I'm talking about the way attachment works. All of us, our attachment works in different ways. Some people don't want a wife, but they want money. Or they want power. It's up to each person to decide what they want, Each of us is supporting our karma. So if it's a boy you want, then it's always in your mind. You're always thinking, even some people talk about how they planned their wedding when they were 5. Because the view is, I want to find, I'm not criticizing, but this is the way attachment works. So attachment is the feeling of missing something, and then depending on your karma, it'll be, in her case, the boyfriend. So therefore you think about it all the time. That's a function of attachment. You can't stop thinking about it. So it's there all the time, and it determines what you do. So then she finds a boyfriend. So suddenly you feel like you now become a whole person, or you found your other half, haven't you? So this is all the attachment, not just to the sex. It is the attachment to the house, attachment to the baby, attachment to the idea of being a wife, attachment to the possessions. They're all there too. But the most primordial one is this sense that now I'm a real person. Someone is showing me, someone is approving of me, and we can see how it is in our culture. Now it's different, but you would never go to a party without a husband. You didn't exist. And look at the culture before when we weren't even a real person or woman. I mean, in India, they chucked the live wife on the dead husband's pyre. I'm sure they don't. Maybe they still do it in the back towns in India. Who knows? So we can see this is all the suffering, the karma we create. So you have attachment. We don't call it attachment. We just call it normal. I want a husband. Then you meet him and you do fall in love, and he is gorgeous and he is kind. I'm not criticizing. And then you have love for him. So let's look at the difference. Attachment is neurotic, hungry, delusional, disturbing, distressing state of mind that's the main voice of the primordial sense of a separate self. These are simple words. So and this is the point now, if you mainly had attachment, this is the thing, if you mainly had attachment, you would be a vampire. If you didn't have much love, much kindness, much generosity, and this is why it's crucial to make this utter distinction, which Buddhism does, between the neuroses and the virtues. We don't think of ethics in our culture. We don't think of ethics. But a person who's got a lot of love and kindness and generosity and forgiveness, as well as attachment, they'll have a fairly reasonable relationship. But why we have problems in a relationship is not because you love somebody. If you're mainly got attachment with this massive emotional hunger, then it looks like love. He will think you love him. No, you don't. But if he's looking at you all shiny-eyed, because he's doing what your attachment wants, you are prepared to love him, which means may you be happy, baby. But look what happens when his attachment starts to die down. And he doesn't do everything you want, and he doesn't come home on time, he doesn't like you so much anymore. Then you get angry, then you get jealous, and before you know it, he'll kill him or he'll kill you. Because mainly attachment, and when attachment doesn't get what it wants, anger arises. So in the beginning it was divine. Attachment painted this holy, delicious picture of this divine Fred. But then start to get annoyed with him, you get frustrated, he chooses tea, he chooses cup the wrong, he farts in the sheets instead of the toilet. Suddenly you start to see these faults. This is normal life. Your attachment starts to die down, and what replaces it is aversion. Now, if you're a quiet person, you'll build it up. And for 40 years, you'll put up with him, but you will hate the sight and the sound and the smell of this man. And people live like that. I hyperventilate thinking about it. I've got a friend.
Venerable Robina.
What?
I read a news article about a guy who actually murdered his wife, and in the trial they asked him why, and he just said, because I couldn't stand the sound of her chewing.
There you go. This is the exact example. This is the one, and people, this is such a powerful example, Miffy, but this is the thing that no one looking at their minds. He never looked at his mind once, but not only that, he didn't have the courage to think either I change my mind or I get the hell out of here. He went back like a moth to a flame, and that's what most relationships do. And why? Because you're scared of what people think. You're scared of what the world, I can't do that. No, I might get criticized. That's not for his approval, it's for the approval of the so-called world out there. This is the nightmare. We are blind as bats, we are not aware, and we live in a nightmare. This is a nightmare of attachment. Forget even killing and lying and stealing. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. So we have to distinguish between attachment and love. So the difference would be this: if you've got attachment and you're working on your mind, then you see you get annoyed. Suddenly the first time, you'll always notice the first time you got annoyed with your beloved new husband. Suddenly the farts. You still think, oh, so sweet, I love him, his farts are even lovely, but eventually your farts get very boring. So before you know it, you're starting to get annoyed, but you don't say anything. Or you might, but it'll sound all love, oh, darling, don't fart like that, and you try to crack a joke. But it's called anger, and before you know it, you're shouting at him, And before you know it, one day you look in this bed and you think, who is this disgusting person? Get the hell out of my bed, and then you change it for another version. Because attachment slowly diminished, then annoyance took over, anger took over, and then what happened to your love and compassion? It went out the window. But if you've got love and compassion and you've made a decision, this is the person for your life, you work on your mind, you accept the farts, you accept the chewing, or you try to find a way to change something. But this is the normal, ordinary way that people live their lives. We're not talking about the massive multi-murderers here. We're talking about ordinary people, unconscious. So if you have mainly love and compassion and kindness, you will work on your attachment, you'll be forgiving, and you will give up the anger, and then you'll have a happy relationship. But this is really hard work. It doesn't happen naturally. It's love and compassion and forgiveness and patience. They are your saving grace. They are why your relationship works, not your attachment and your anger, your jealousy and your anxiety and your pride. They're utterly and completely different components of a person. They're like weeds and herbs. This is it. So this is the crucial point that Buddhism is making. There's a distinct difference. And by learning to hear the different voices, that's the liberating thing, and that's called practice. I think we can hear it, right?
Venerable Robina, there was a question from Louise that's related to this, that if we are continuously frustrated with someone's behaviour, is it our thoughts to acknowledge and that then we think their behaviours won't change? How do we go?
So that last bit, what Louise said, tell me exactly what Louise said.
Is it our thoughts to just acknowledge that it's happening and let go, as we know their behaviour won't change?
Okay, this is getting us to the essence of the essence of practice. Okay. So if we're really, really, really good at practice, we've been doing it for years and we're really beginning to be successful, what that will be this. Let's say it's a relationship with your partner. Okay, no, so I'll start like this. Let's say we're in the typical victim mode, which is everybody. hopeless, believing he'll make me happy, all the dumping on relationship, all the dumping of expectations onto him, and then you're an ordinary person, full of emotion, full of attachment, full of neediness, think he's divine. You've got some love, some compassion. You set up this little household together, and then the problems start, and then you go mad. And then if you're a kind of aggressive person, you're going to be angry, you'll be shouting, you'll be throwing things at him. Or if you're a more quiet person, you'll suppress it and you'll complain to your sister. But you'll keep, this is the point, because the world, the pressure of the world, and it's less so these days, but certainly not in Asia. And still in Asia, this pressure is so strong that you must have a relationship. It wouldn't even occur to anybody in some cultures to even consider leaving the husband. You'd better be dead, So in our culture, at least we've got some space. So the victim relationship means you've got the marriage, you've committed to it, you've got the kids, you've got the house, and this is not easy. But there's an assumption that you're stuck in it. You don't know you can change your mind, but the other thing is you don't know you can change your relationship. You see, we think we shouldn't do that. It's bad, it's wrong. And why? Because we're attached to what people think of us. Mummy won't approve, and daddy won't approve, and the children won't approve, and you've got this big relationship with all this big extended family. It's a big pressure. I agree. It's an enormous pressure. The courage to say, this is the point now, okay, you've got two options. In the end, when you practice, you have precisely two options, Louise. The husband farts. He chooses food wrong. You get annoyed, you see it. Now, if you begin, first you're the victim, you're not noticing anything, but now you decide, you say you like to use Buddhism, and you're starting to work on your mind. You're starting to understand karma. And so by this point, if let's say things get very stressed, you will also, before you do anything, you will decide, is this relationship worthwhile? You will even decide, is it? Because you've only got two options. One, leave him. Two, change your mind. There is no other option. But most of us, we don't make either of those decisions. So you live in hell with just your job. You've been in this job for 32 years. I hate my job. The boss is evil. The colleagues are horrible. Well, Robina, you could change your job. Oh, no, I'll never get another job. Not possible. I couldn't do that. Well, you could change your mind, Robina. No, he's evil. I can't do that. This is how mostly we live our lives. Absolutely paralyzed. Unable to even move, even to think of the possibility of leaving this relationship, leaving the job. This is terrifying. And what paralyzes is this absolute schizophrenic sense of I'm a nothing person. You don't even think you can make decisions. So when you begin to practice, you start to become courageous. And this is the point, as Lama Zopa said, it's ridiculous to think you've got to live together for the rest of your life. There's all this heavy duty stuff in our Christian culture that it's wrong to divorce. For the Buddhists, karma's finished for God's sake. You don't just, so you leave it, so you'd think, let's say you're getting upset with your hubby, and many people go through this. So you've got to decide, is it worthwhile? You've got to look at that job. Okay, before I decide to leave the job, let's see if there's something in this job that will help me become a better person, that will help me learn my skills more. Is there something worthwhile? And that's up to your mind to change your interpretation of the job. That's already profound, because you're reinterpreting your job. Instead of thinking it's a creepy job, let's see if there's something worthwhile here. And if you can find that, it's a good thing to do. You'll get some benefit and you'll be more happy. And then the other one is, if you really can see no benefit and it's so difficult, then you say, okay, oh no, you will leave. You can leave. But the first one is you decide the job's worthwhile and you change your mind about it. You reinterpret it. It's not set in stone. That's why my amazing friend in prison, Sunny, who was on death row living in a nightmare, she changed her interpretation of it. That's the really powerful practice. Now, if you can't change your mind, you're not capable enough, because the husband is such a brute and so horrible and the job is so disgusting, that's perfectly fine to realize you can't handle it. But you don't blame the husband. You don't blame the boss. You just know you can't handle it. So you say, I'm out of here, baby. Goodbye. How intelligent. You have to know your capability. You have to know where you're at and what you can handle. That's what practice means. You've got to know where you're at. If you can handle it, if you know there's something worthwhile in this relationship and you are prepared to work on your mind. Now, what that means in the West is you work on therapy and you point out his faults and you demand he change, and he points out your faults and he demands you change. I'm not talking about that. You can talk about things, but that's just more blame. And you're negotiating. If you change, I'll change. No, we're talking about you deciding this relationship is worthwhile. It is good for me. I'm happy to be in there. I've got some karma with this guy. I'm going to work on my mind. And you will shut your mouth and you will change your mind and you will become happy. And then because you're showing something different, this will help him change.
So,
That's
Venerable,
really
does
profound
this
practice.
also applies to, say, our relationship with our parents?
Everything,
Which often...
yes, our parents especially. This is the point I said before. Remember, when anger's there and attachment's there and jealousy and anxiety, they're rigid, they're set in stone, they're an absolute picture, and there's no sense that you can see it from another point of view. But this is amazing attitude when you know you can change your interpretation. So that means starting, let's say you hate your mummy. Your mummy's a neurotic, and she might be neurotic, I agree with you. She's mean, she's nasty, she's angry, she's neurotic. She might be those things. But because you've got your own fears and your aversion is only seeing her bad qualities. So one of the most profound practices, which is in the Bodhisattva path, you start to, like, get your list, get a piece of paper, write it down, start to remember some of her good qualities. This is very shocking for us. We forget them. Because when you're in love with your mummy, like I was in love with my mummy until about 12. Maybe then I remember the first time I found fault in my mother. It was like the worst sin in the world. I could not believe the shock when I suddenly found fault with my mum, but it was downhill from there. And then she became my worst enemy, like all our mums do. So first you're in love with your mum, and you think she's a saint, and now start getting angry, and then you start finding fault. And then when you're full of attachment for somebody, you see no problems. When you're full of anger, you see no virtues. They're extreme. So when you know for yourself, when you know you are not one picture, when you know that person looking with daggers at you is only seeing your faults, it is heartbreaking. You know they're not true. Well, that's how we are with everybody. Then you start to change your mind. And like a friend of mine, here, she's been talking to me about how she hated her mother, loathed her mother. She now adores her mother because she's changed her interpretation of her mother, one thought at a time. This is the essence of Buddha's practice. Because finally, when we get to emptiness, Buddha's telling us that actually, Robina, there's nothing out there that has any intrinsic nature whatsoever. It's all your own projections. Which doesn't mean your husband didn't beat you. It doesn't mean your mummy wasn't mean. That's not what's being said. It's much more subtle than that. But we have the power to reinterpret things. That's what changing your mind means. And it's intense practice. And it means with everybody in our lives. And for Buddha, this is the source of your happiness. Because when you've got less delusions and more virtues, that is what happiness is. That's it. It's very powerful, unbelievable. But you've got to have the wisdom to know what's the right thing to do. Maybe it's the best thing to leave that relationship. Have the wisdom to know it. No matter what people think, it's a brave, courageous decision to make. But if you're prepared to work with it because you think it's worthwhile, not that you want him to, this is the major one. In our ones, we have to get him to work as well. No, you work on your mind. Let him do what he damn well likes. You work on your mind. This is really powerful. This is hysterical for us. We can't stand this. We've got to make him work as well. If I'm going to change, you'd better change, baby. That's manipulation. That's not practice. This is intense. This is intense, I tell you. Are we communicating?
We are, yes. It's been very helpful, Venerable.
Good.
I'm also thinking that it makes it really tricky to have any arguments if you're a Buddhist.
I mean, that's the point. In a way, it's the truth. It really is the truth. I mean, don't be passive. But this is where we learn slowly to distinguish, to know whether we're coming from virtue or non-virtue. This is the skill we have to learn. So it doesn't mean you can't see. What happens is we chuck the baby out for bathwater and think that being virtuous means being like a little doormat. No, you can be strong and clear, but it's coming from the right place. That's what we have to trust, and that can be strong, like a loving mother. She's told you 5 times, no more chocolate. She hasn't listened. Go to your room. If you're a good mummy, she will think you're really mean, the little girl. Oh, mummy's so mean. No, mummy's being kind. She's using wrathful methods. She's coming from the purest place. That's the bodhisattva level, I tell you. So it doesn't mean weak and passive and pathetic. That's gross. Not at all.
It's so very tricky, though, Venerable Robina, when, to reinterpret things. If we haven't got a taste of that, it's really hard to even know how to do that.
You're asking the same question all the time, Miffy. You've got to learn. It's like you're saying it's so difficult to know the difference between C major and C minor because you haven't got your bloody theory, Miffy. Get your music. Lift your eyes and look at the piano notes and see what Bach tells you to do. So you read the book and there's the instructions. You don't know how to make a cake. I can't tell the difference between 1 egg and 2. Well, learn. Look at the recipe. I've got to keep answering that way because we forget that, Miffy. We think we're going to find some secret in our own mind of how to do it. That's absurd. You don't just sit there trying to play Bach, intuit Bach. It's written on the piece of paper. It's easy. Just follow the instructions and then you become familiar with it. It's not complicated. But we forget that repeatedly.
Yeah, well, that's a tragedy, that the main problem is that, like, say, lack of concentration. You go into the kitchen, you get halfway through cooking a cake and then you forget you're even doing it.
There you go. That's right. Of course it is. So that's why I've got to do concentration as well. So slowly, people, have confidence we can do it, that the methods are there, the map is there, and it's up to us if we want to use these methods. No one's forcing you to. You can prefer Jung if you wish, or Freud, or Jesus. That's your business. I'm just talking Buddha deal here, Buddha's deal, the way the Tibetans talk. That's my culture. That's my path. What else, darling? Something else?
Well, yes. So Janine, who asked a couple of those questions, said yes, we're kind of always looking for shortcuts where there are none. So we want that easy way or the shortcut way.
That's the kind of laziness, wanting to make it all go away and just suddenly get and that's kind of a little bit naive, yeah. We have to be persevere. We have to prepare to persevere and confront the problems and look at them and own them and face them and then move through them. Not just divert, not just whiz around. You can't do that. There's no way you can achieve anything like that. It's not possible. It's a good point. What else, darling?
So what would a healthy, relationship look like? So you're in the world, but you've got this kind of internal radical Buddhist change happening in your mind.
It would mean understanding attachment, and the main thing in relationships is attachment. And this is what always women are accused of, the nagging wife, Attachment is never satisfied. It always wants to change the other person. So that's what classically attachment is. If he was this way, and if he was this way, and if he could do this, and if he did this, and did this, and did this, then I'd be satisfied. You're never satisfied. But of course, it's a bottomless pit. No matter how much he changes, you will still not be satisfied because you'll still find something else at fault. That's the nature of attachment and anger. So attachment, when it doesn't get what it wants, which is very normal because attachment can't get what it wants, then aversion arises. Then we think it's his problem, he should change. And then if we boss him and manipulate him, or we boss her and manipulate her, then we think, now we're happy. But you won't get happy, you just get more unhappy. So the practice is stopping trying to change the other person. Learn to accept this is who my hubby is, warts and all. This is so shocking for us. He's not our child. He's not our child. Now, if it is your child, that is not the view. Your job is to learn to know how to help that child. That's different. But your hubby is not your child. This is who he is. Love him for who he is. We know these words. This is profound practice. I always use the example of a friend of mine. It's something like this, The husband's an alcoholic. Been an alcoholic for years. So who wants an alcoholic husband? Nobody. But he's a quiet alcoholic. So he doesn't punch and kick. He's a quiet alcoholic, He drinks his beer and his wine and retires at night and he just drinks it until he goes to sleep. He doesn't harm anybody. He's kind, he's generous, but he's an alcoholic. So normally when you get an alcoholic husband, that is what looms largest for you. This dominates your mind. You talk about to your sisters and your mummy and you're freaking out and you bully him around. You've got to give up alcohol and you threaten. All you see is the alcoholism. Well, this person, she's more patient. So she at some point decided, she's a Buddhist, at some point, he's not, decided, well, I'm going to make a decision here. Shall I stay or shall I go? So she had to weigh it up. So this is exactly what I said before. She looked at his good qualities. She literally weighed up the good qualities: kind, patient, generous, forgiving, doesn't make trouble, doesn't vomit in the soup. Bit stubborn. So she weighed it up and she drew a new picture. So she decided, and then for the benefit of the family and the grandchildren, a very close family, she weighed it up very rationally and decided it was beneficial to stay. So she changed her mind. So she's a happy person and she now adores this drunken husband because she sees him differently.
Venerable, there's an Australian rock star who I can't actually remember the name of now, but a very similar story that he was an alcoholic for 40 years and his wife stayed with him the whole time, and she made that, there you go, Jimmy Barnes, made that complete decision. Yes. She loved her husband and the alcoholism was a sickness and she could see below it. even though he couldn't.
There you go.
40 years worth
There
of
you go.
drinking.
There you go.
And because of her
Yes.
devotion, actual
Yes.
devotion
Yes.
to caring for him,
Yes.
then he was actually able to
change.
There
you go. But even if he doesn't change, still it's the same. But in other words, and this is the thing when we understand what anxiety is. When attachment, you see, attachment, you've got to realize attachment, for the way Buddha talks, is there deep in our bones. It's at the level of a constant, unceasing, knee-jerk assumption that I must get only the nice things. So the millisecond attachment is thwarted. The millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's the arising of aversion. So now, aversion has a whole spectrum of responses. One is the volatile, ordinary shout, yell, scream. The other more mild levels, which everybody has, are called annoyed, irritated, frustrated, upset, or anxiety. Because the second something doesn't go right, you're panicking, you're worrying about it. But all this is so subtle, and so we don't notice, we don't pay attention. So then either you become depressed or you become violent, depending on your spectrum. On the spectrum, depression is the build up of endless moments of frustration, annoyance, irritated, upset, anxious. It builds up until one day you're inert in bed and you can't move, because we never pay attention, moment by moment by moment. So when you're working on your mind, moment by moment, you're painting a new picture of this person, but you've got to decide it's worthwhile. Don't just sit there like a passive aggression, I've got to put up with it. That's passive aggression. That's not patience. And one day you'll kill him because you're not noticing your mind. So to notice your mind is the miracle, and then to act upon it. And if it isn't possible to live in the relationship, if you can't cope, don't blame him. Just know you can't handle it. So you, sweetheart, I have to leave you. I'm sorry, I can't cope. Then it's an intelligent decision. You've got to know what you can handle or not. Now, of course, the point with my prisoner friends is they don't have the luxury to choose. Sonny, my friend I always mention, on death row, accused of killing 2 policemen. Husband was executed. His head burst into flames when she went to the execution. Her 2 children were given away to her grandparents. They died in a car accident. They were given to the state. This nightmare for 17 years in a cell on her own with a Bible. This is enough to make you go completely out of your brain. She didn't have the luxury. She said, finally, I realized I could not change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. She wasn't even a Buddhist. She did yoga and stuff. She was a nice Jewish hippie. So she changed her mind. I'm not a prisoner, she said. I am a monk. I am not in a cell. I'm in a cave. Now, that's dramatic, but she became a sane, reasonable, powerful, confident, comfortable, kind human being when she left that prison. And now there's no trauma left. But people I know who've lived in rage and despair in prison are full of complete PTSD and all the trauma because they haven't dealt with it. She dealt with it. So there's nothing left over. She's like this little old lady now living in Ireland in a wheelchair with her ex-husband, with a husband who's also accused of murder, 2 policemen in Ireland, and they're both now helping former prisoners. She's like a little old lady. You'd never know she had this nightmarish trauma for 17 years because she dealt with it at the time. This is the point.
So then what's the thing that lets us stop blaming and make that decision to change our mind?
When you realise the pain it's causing you. That's all. The only reason is that. You see, that's the point. The trouble is, the moment when we're the victim, we say, I'm allowed to be angry. We say that, don't we? Because we believe we're the victim. That's the schizophrenic nightmare that we are living in. In other words, we don't notice that the anger is hurting us. We believe the husband's hurting us. And that's what Sunny in prison. She said, I knew I had a choice. I'm putting words into her mouth now. She could see the pain of the rage and the anger and the despair. She could see how that caused her the suffering. She was able to distinguish between the people who harmed her and her own anger. That's the miracle. That's the hardest part. You have to see the pain, the depression, the anxiety, the anger cause you. That's the point. And that's the hardest one to see. Because we think they're doing it and I'm allowed to be angry. In other words, it's like I'm allowed to stab myself. You are. but look at what you're doing to yourself. This is the worst nightmare of all. This is the Buddha, the reason that Buddha says we should have such compassion for sentient beings, that we don't realize that our own depression and anger and anxiety are the cause of the pain. It's pretty
so it's kind of like when you say it's just not worth it. The anger is not worth it. Let it go.
Good enough. And some people, so that's what I find astonishing. Many people have said, I decided after that time, I've decided I'm never going to get angry again. And I am speechless. I have to work on it every day, in my life. 45 years of being a nun, I'm not too bad now. I still get volatile, but I don't have the same, in my mind, the wish to harm, because anger's furious with the person. It still doesn't mean you can't, I haven't turned, you can see I haven't turned into a soft little mousy person yet. I sound like I'm angry, but it's not the same. But it's hard work. I had to work on it. I just couldn't say one day I'll never be angry again. I'm astonished with people. Like when I hear Sonny say, I had the choice. That's admirable. That's incredible. I call that emotional intelligence, But you can see it yourself when this is where if you can learn when the annoyance comes and you hear it criticizing, somebody, your friend of yours, something, and you just say, oh, give it a break, Robina, give her a break. Then suddenly your mind's peaceful. They all say it in the teachings, but you can't hear it. Suddenly your mind's peaceful. Just shut up, give it a break. Because in a way, too, it's none of my business. Who do I think I am that my friend should do what I want? That's what attachment is. Who do I think I am that my husband should do what I want? But that's what attachment is, like a manipulator. It's so manipulative because you assume that you own him. And he'd better do what you want. That's the nightmare. That's the wickedness of attachment. It's so manipulative. It's so kind of wicked. Who the hell do I think I am that my husband should behave the way I want? If he's beating me up every day, you better make a decision. Bodhisattvas won't mind the beatings, but you're not bodhisattvas, so get the hell out of that house as quick as possible. If you can ask him to change, please do so. But if he doesn't, leave. It's the most intelligent thing you can do. The alcoholic one, he didn't harm anybody, so she was able to live with that, This is intense stuff, but we're capable. We all recognize this. We all know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking Buddhism in a down-to-earth Australian way. Isn't it? Time to go home. Okay, you babes. Thank you so much, everybody, precious one. So just do our little prayers. Don't put the Tibetan up. I'll just say the words and think the words as I say the Tibetan, okay? So the first prayer is thinking. This amazing 2 hours we've had, Every thought we've had is sowed a seed. Every seed is planted in the mind. We're going to nourish these seeds with our effort from this moment, one little tiny baby step at a time, and then rejoice in your effort. I did a good job today. Think like this, Then may these seeds ripen in the future, because they won't go astray, in my Buddhahood. Then I'm capable of helping everybody. And then second, may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. Gewadin yududag lama sangye drub gyurne drowa chikyang malupa jai sala gopashok Jangchob semchog rinpoche ma kye panam ke guchig kye panyampa me payang gong ne gong du pavashok. Okie doke, everybody. Thank you, precious ones.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you, Venerable Robina. Robin said Dharma is the best relationship counsellor ever.
Very true. Well done. Good on you, people. Much love to all of you. And keep moving and never give up and be brave. And know you've got amazing potential. Much love to all of you. See you next time.